Welcome, everybody. Thank you all so very much for joining us, and especially thank you, Steph, for turning up, because I think it would be a very quiet webinar without you here. So I'm very, very pleased that you've come and you're here. For those of you who don't know anything about me or Advance, I am Debbie Wood. I'm the CEO of Advance, and Steph is one of our trainers and has been involved in Advance probably, we thought, for about 14 years. I've only known Steph for a couple of years. I've only been in Advance a couple of years. But it's lovely to be able to host you. It's lovely to be able to celebrate your new book with you. And yeah, we are really delighted to be able to host this today. The other thing to make you aware of is if you wish to have captions on underneath when we're talking, you can actually just press that again on that bottom line within Zoom, so that if it makes it easier for you, the words will hopefully come up on the screen. So 2 minutes about Advance, which I promise to be really quick, but we're a charity that's based in Hertfordshire, and we work with parents and carers and professionals who are involved in the care of young people with ADHD and autism. And we've been around for almost 30 years now as a charity. We have a helpline, we have training courses, workshops, coaching service, and other specialist services. So Steph's one of our coaches and trainers, and has been involved in Advance way before I was, and then spent some time away and has come back, which we're delighted with. And yeah, I just really feel really very privileged to be able to ask you lots of questions tonight, Steph. So thank you.
Kind one, thanks.
So as a starter for 10, I'm going to start with, we've prepped a couple of questions. So did you ever imagine writing a book, or did you always want to write a book?
Okay, before I answer that, I'm just going to say that I love working for Advance, such a great charity. We're helping loads of families in this county. And, you know, I hope it's kind of replicated in other counties across this country and other countries as well. But did I want to write a book? Well, so I read somewhere that apparently the statistics say that 60% of people in this country want to write a book, and 80% in America. 80% of people want to write a book. But I feel a bit guilty. So I never really wanted to write a book. I've never had that as one of my, aims in life. I like English. I never thought I was brilliant at it. I did okay. I actually did business and German as a degree. So it wasn't really English there. But my mum was a teacher, primary school teacher. So I guess she, set us off with a good basis for that. But yeah, so not a book. And even the blog was kind of I didn't have any plans to do that either. That was kind of just on the day that Sasha was diagnosed with autism. And I kind of just came home and thought, I want to avoid repeating myself in lots of appointments that I knew I was going to somehow end up doing. And I also wanted to try and remind myself of what was happening. And then I wanted to explain to other people what she was like, because she was only 2.5 at the time. And I think a lot of people would have seen her behaviour and just thought, oh, that toddler tantrums, and why don't get a better grip of her or whatever. But because we all already had an older daughter, we could see the difference and see how that was different. So all of that, I guess, is why I started blogging. But yeah, I didn't have the plans to write the book.
So we're very glad that you did. So can you give us a really quick summary? Because obviously, if you read the whole book, it would take us the whole evening. So could you give us a really quick summary about what the book's about?
Yeah, so it's our family experiences as in the family, but from that day of diagnosis, really, all through that diagnosis, a little bit about what had been going on up until that point when she was 2.5, but all the way through till about a couple of years ago. The book actually says at the start that they're 17 and 15, but they're actually 18 and 16 now, and they were 16 and 14 when I wrote most of the book. So it kind of went up to that point for them, and it's about our everyday life and the challenges we face with education along the way, and more specifically, it's about the type of autism that we feel Sasha has, so PDA.
PDA. So in a nutshell, what is PDA?
Okay, I'll try because it takes a while. We run courses on this, but it takes hours to try and explain this. But so PDA is pathological demand avoidance, and it's said to be a type or a profile of autism. So PDAs would have autistic characteristics, but then on top of that, there's some key features that would then, I guess, group them together, as being PDA. So I'll give the top line what the PDA Society says PDA is. And the PDA Society is, the national charity for PDA. They have a brilliant website with so much great information on it. So I'll just go the top line, what those key features of PDA are. I think there's 6. There's that PDAs would resist and avoid everyday demands of life. And then they would use social strategies to avoid those demands. So not usually just saying no. So yeah, that we could go into that a bit more, but they would appear sociable on the surface, but then they're kind of not understanding those social interactions very well. They would experience excessive mood swings and being impulsive. And then something about obsessive behavior, which is kind of an autistic feature, but an obsessive is not a great word, really. Passionate was like passionate rather than obsessive, but about people often rather than things or objects. And then the last one I think is about being comfortable in role play and having good imaginations and doing pretend. And sometimes that can be to an extreme extent, like taking on that, being a cat for, even months on end we've heard of. So, but role play was quite a big thing.
Okay. And just out of interest, what made you think that it was PDA for Sasha?
So when she got the autism diagnosis, I started going along to some coffee mornings groups with other mums of autistic girls. And they were great. They were a real lifeline for me in those first days. I've never heard about autism before, didn't know anybody autistic. And then, I got to share what was happening with them. But I'd always go along and think, well, Sasha sounds a bit like their daughters, but there was just something different. She didn't seem to fit that group. So that's what made me start thinking, well, I didn't think it wasn't autism, but I thought it just doesn't, that doesn't really describe it totally. So, she was quite sociable. She loved being around other people, both adults and children. And she did use those social strategies was one thing we picked up on. So she would say things like, my legs don't work, if you asked her to come over here and do something, for example. Or she'd try and distract us in some way. So it wasn't usually an outright refusal to do things. And then she had a great imagination, and there was lots of role play going on. So I think those were the sort of the key things that made us think, well, it just sounds a bit different to all the other autistic descriptions we were hearing at the time. And then from quite a young age, she was avoiding demands or doing things, everyday things that should have been fun. So for her, she loved swimming, but we would find it really difficult to get her out of the house to go swimming, even though she absolutely loved it when she was there. And, we would kind of find it difficult to understand why there didn't seem to be any sort of rhyme and reason as to why she was refusing to do it. So it was kind of, all through lots of different everyday things like that. It wasn't just refusing to do things that weren't fun or, when we were trying to make her do things. There was lots of things. And yeah, then I suppose that the last thing, as not many people know, but our eldest daughter was actually diagnosed with both ADHD and autism just a couple, 2 or 3 years ago, actually. And for us, the differences from a young age were clear to see. Obviously, the 2 girls, or no 2 individuals are the same anyway, but, our eldest would respond to all those typical parenting strategies, and that worked fine. Everything was going as we thought it would. But even now, following the late diagnosis, I can still very clearly see the difference in profile. We'd never say that our eldest had a PDA profile because we don't need to, because she doesn't. So for me, that's kind of been something that's helped us highlight the difference.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting. And it's really good to think that in some ways you've got the 2 girls that you can then see the difference between the 2 of them, and all of us are unique individuals. One of the things you've been doing for a long time is blogging. So at what point did you decide to move from blogging to writing this book?
So yeah, 14 years of blogging for. Excuse me. It was actually the publishers who first approached me. So JKP, they do write a lot of, they publish a lot of books on autism and other kind of areas, alongside that. But they approached me and asked me, because of the blog, really, if I would consider writing a book. but they were wanting more of a self-help or advice for parents, which I know lots of parents want, but it wasn't really what I felt comfortable writing, because I always say I know what our situation is and what works for us and our family and our daughters, but I find it difficult to tell other people what is going to work for them, because you just don't know anybody else's situation. So there's a whole range of things that might work, but it wasn't, I don't have that magic one, but it wasn't. I didn't feel I could tell others what to do. But I did think, I thought on it for a few years. I think it was 7 years ago or something. And then about 3 years ago, maybe, I went back to them and said, I just can't write like that, because I just write from, the heart and our experiences. So that's what I suggested I do. Because I wanted to have more books about PDA, more literature about PDA out there, other people see, hear about it. So we kind of compromised, and the publisher said, okay, you can write your story, but only if you put some advice in it. So that's what I've tried to do at the end of each chapter.
No, that sounds great. So what are your hopes for the book, and what's your aim?
Well, okay, I'm going to read a little bit from the book.
Excellent.
Because I've described it in the introduction and my memory is terrible. So I'm going to read a bit of this, that why, I suppose, why I did it. What I hope it will do. So I say, so I'm still writing the blog and sharing examples of our life on social media. And I've often said that the blog was a form of free therapy for me in the early years, a way of sharing my thoughts and feelings. Apart from keeping it as a diary for us, I wanted to educate people about how our younger daughter was experiencing life differently. I wanted to explain to family, friends, and those in the wider community why Sasha acted and reacted the way she did, in the hope that understanding her better would help smooth her path through life. And then my hope is that this book will provide some advice and support for other families with children who display similar characteristics to Sasha. Some children might not meet the criteria for a PDA diagnosis, but could still have some of the characteristics that make up this profile. And other children might be on long waiting lists for assessment. But whatever the situation, it's likely that modifying our expectations of how we expect parenting to go can lead to a calmer, happier life. Typical parenting approaches do not help PDA children, and the more we can reduce the expectations we put on our children, the better. So understanding and compassion can make a big difference. And once we know what works best for our child, it becomes easier to stand strong and have the confidence to educate other people around us. So by opening up about our experiences, I hope I can help other people understand the impact that pathological demand avoidance can have on everyday life. Some might think I'm being too optimistic when I say that I hope this book will also reach people who work in education or healthcare settings, but that is a big wish of mine. Understanding PDA is key to supporting some individuals, and sometimes even small changes in communication with PDA children and their families can make a big difference. So one phrase I've heard said to several parents over the years is, if we let your child do that, all the other children will want to do it too. However, accommodating the differing needs of one child does not have to negatively impact other children when it comes to education. And we found that other children were actually very understanding and accepting of our daughter's differences. So, I mean, that kind of answers that a bit, why I was writing it and I hoped for it.
Thank you. So how did you find, how did you find the process of writing a book? What did you make of that?
Yeah, so it was really different to blog writing. So so the old blog posts were very much a quick moment in time, and very much more, I guess, more colloquially written. I thought I'd be able to convert some of those older blog posts to put them into the book, but that didn't really work very well because just a different kind of writing style. So it was a lot of work doing the book. A lot of hard work, I would say. Difficult to kind of fill it, but also to remember everything that's happened over, quite a long time scale. I don't have the best memory anyway, so the blog helped jog some things a bit, but I had to try and fill things in. So I found it really difficult, but at this point I thought I'll ask if Julia's there. Julia, are you there? If she's not left us.
Hopefully not.
Julia.
There I am.
Being Julia. Yeah,
hello.
hi Julia. Your lovely picture was up on the screen there. I hope everyone can see
yes.
as well. But how did you find writing a book?
Slightly different process to yours, Steph. So for those that don't know in the room, I have PDA or am PDA, whichever way you want to look at it. So obviously me writing a book is slightly more challenging. And I did try for a period of time, on and off for about 4 years, to try and get something to paper. What I had, probably, if you put it all together, would maybe make one chapter. But it didn't make any sense. So I can't remember if I asked Ruth Fiddler or she asked me, but it happened. And we were doing it before lockdown, but obviously Ruth's schedule was very busy. Mine is. So finding dates when we both had an afternoon free was quite difficult. Because what we were doing was Ruth would have a phone call with me. I would talk to her about a particular topic that we wanted to cover, and then Ruth would write it all down and type it up. So we were doing this, and then lockdown happened, and then all of a sudden, me and Ruth had nothing to do. Both of us had no work, and we were stuck in our houses. So all of a sudden, the book got quite a shove. So we finished it in about 5 months during the first lockdown, and so that worked to our advantage. And yeah, it was basically, so we'd have like an hour, 2 hour long phone call. Most of you that know me know I don't talk very slowly. So poor Ruth, I don't know what shorthand she was using, but it worked. And she would write down everything, and then we would edit it together. And I would put back in rude words that she'd taken out or changed. Because I'm like, I would never say that. I think she had me say "damn it" once, and I was like, I've never said that in my life, apart from now when I've just said it. And I wanted to use exclamation marks when I wanted to shout something, negatively or positively, and she kept taking them out, and I was like, I'm putting that back in. So there was a lot of sort of friendly fighting, but yeah, it got done.
Yeah, and it's great. I totally recommend that to everyone as well, seeing it from your point of view. Ruth Fiddler, just for anybody who doesn't know, is an education consultant who's worked with a lot of PDA individuals, hasn't she, and written a few books. So yeah, it was great to have her.
Yeah, I think she in fact started at Sutherland House School the year I was diagnosed. So, so I'm not giving away any. I'll just say it was 95, and we'll leave it at that. I'm not doing the maths. I'm sorry I sound so. I've got a cold, so I need lots of sympathy tonight. And but yeah, it is a strange experience writing a book, though. It's very I found it very cathartic. Put any demons that I did have to bed. There weren't many, but and quite therapeutic, revisiting things that perhaps I hadn't thought about for a long time. And it was fun. I think it was fun. It was fun up until the editing part.
I was going to say until the edits, yeah, the edits.
And I had to be strong with myself, because I knew that when we send it off to them, it's going to come back looking very different once somebody's edited it. And I had to be really firm with myself and say that these people do this for a living. This is not their first book. They know exactly what readers want, what they don't want, how it flows, how it doesn't flow. So I had to just let them do it. But it's still, when the edited version came back, I was like, oh, no. And I had to literally stop myself from emailing very angrily, going, oh my God, you've ruined my book. But I had to trust that they knew what they were, that was hard, because it was my baby, and they've, moved things around. It was, not good.
Yeah, that happened to me too.
But they did a good job. So
thinking about that, Steph, just out of interest, how did you decide on the cover?
Oh, so yeah, the cover wasn't really anything to do with me. That was the publishers. So they came up with the design and put it to me. It was going to be pale yellow to start with, and I actually asked them if it could be pink. Just pink, as you say, is one of my colours, but also it's Sasha's favourite colour. So I had in my head that it might be a bit more bit more pink overall, but they weren't really keen on that idea. So it went back and came back orange, which, you know, I kind of went, oh, okay. So yeah, now it's definitely grown on me. And you know, Julie said earlier she liked the light bulb design. So yeah, and I think that the light bulb moment is something a lot of PDA parents say when they read about or hear about PDA, because it makes such a difference to life.
So one of the questions that's come through is very similar to one of the ones we talked about, which is, what do your girls think of the book?
Yeah, so Sasha and Sasha have both been really supportive of the book from the start, and they were about the blog as well, you know, from an age when they could read it. You know, they have read bits of that on and off, but they've always known I've been blogging and writing. So they were both happy with that. And I talked to them obviously about the idea of a book and how that would kind of in a way be more permanent. But they were fine with that because they knew why we were doing it, you know, to try and help other parents and help other people understand what was, you know, happening. So we did ask how they might want to be involved, you know, whether they could both write something for it. Sasha's not really a fan of books anyway, but or writing. Although actually she does write her own or type her own fan fiction, but we're not allowed to read it. But so yeah, they didn't want to write anything. Sasha wondered whether she might do some art of her artwork for the book, because she really enjoys, you know, creating art, but couldn't really decide what. And then we both kind of came to the conclusion that actually a lot of artists don't like their earlier work, so maybe seeing some art that you think isn't as good as it could have been permanently on a book might not have been the best idea. So that's kind of what, you know, she came to the conclusion on. And then she decided that we should do this kind of an interview, which is what's at the back of the book. And Sasha doesn't like questions generally, but this was kind of the only way she could think of having, you know, some of her thoughts put in the book. So she didn't think much of my questions, maybe, you know, changed a few and added something, but she was happy with that generally. And she likes the book amazingly, because she doesn't like most books and won't read books really, although she can read. But yeah, so she doesn't read books. But when I finished writing the book, I printed it all off on paper, and she actually read it in 2 sittings from one night to the next, you know, off A4 sheets of paper, and was totally happy with it. And then when it arrived a couple of weeks ago, she picked it up and read it again, you know, from one night to the next day. And yeah, so she's really happy with it. And our eldest, you know, says she's proud of me having done it. So that's really nice. It's good.
And that's great. And I think rightly so to be proud of Hannah having done that. It's an amazing achievement. So do you have any regrets at all about blogging or writing the book?
Not really. So I kind of always say I'm a glass half full kind of person, and you know, I try obviously to be positive. And no regrets is something I've always said, because I feel you can only move on from where you are now. There's no point looking back, because you can't change it. So you know, that's not to say that there's things in life I don't wish, you know, I wish I maybe had done differently, but not a lot really on the whole. I just kind of have to be happy with what's happened and try and move forward. So when I started blogging, I didn't really think it through or think where it might end up. And obviously the girls were a lot younger. But, you know, as I said, somewhere along the way, they became involved and understood what was happening. So that's, if they'd have said they didn't want me to write anything, and they have said they don't want their photos shared now they're older, but they're fine with the younger ones still being shared because they're out there. But so that's fine, you know, I understand that. And obviously, you know, I just go with what they want on that. But yeah, I just kind of, I tend to go and live in the moment. So that was the blog, but and the same really about the book. I just hope it helps people. I have read one quite negative review about it already, and you know, there will be people who don't like it. That's fine. Some people who don't agree with PDA because they're not really reading and listening to people who experience PDA. That's not so fine. But yeah, it's kind of, I have to take all of that and just go, you know, it's done now as well. So yeah, it's out there, and hopefully it'll help people.
Yeah. So having had the experience of writing a book, do you think you'll write a sequel?
No.
Oh, that was a quick answer.
No. Well, I mean, yeah, I never say never as well. So I have no plans at the moment to do that. I can't see. I guess, you know, if it was to try and help people again in some other way, whether it was more advice, but yeah, I don't suppose I would carry on the story because now the girls are older, and I think I stopped at a good age, really, that sort of 14 and 16. Obviously, there is more has gone on, in terms of education and life generally for us since I stopped writing. But it's, I feel it's their story now. And if either of the girls want to write their own book, that would be great. Like Julie has done, hearing it from the people who are experiencing it themselves is, so valuable. So I'd love it if they would do that, but I'm not putting any pressure on them to do it.
Absolutely. Well, one of the questions that has actually come in is, how has the PDA changed for your daughter now she's older?
Yeah, well, that is a really good question. Yeah, it was. How do I explain that? It was a lot more obvious when she was younger, I guess, because we were trying to do a lot more. We hadn't realised how difficult all that we were doing was for her initially, and also we were trying to kind of keep up that whole family life, having a young family and going out and doing lots of things and having lots of experiences. But yeah, so the avoidance made all of that very difficult. And I would say we always had that plan A, B, C, and Z, if we ever wanted to go anywhere. So yeah, but we, just kind of kept going. But life has quietened down with not working out so much as well, but not leaving the house and being a teenager. There's a lot of kind of, change in that way. But her PDA is no different. It's still, she still finds things difficult. And her anxiety in some ways has increased, about certain areas. But I think there's a bit where I explain that in the book, that she has anxiety over some things that, non-PDA people would have as well, like flying. We flew abroad when she was younger and she managed that, but up until some point where kind of her brain worked out that she didn't want to be flying in an aeroplane, and then she can't do that anymore, but that's something that other people would, might struggle with as well. Natural disasters and worrying, that kind of anxiety about, if it rains, it's going to flood. She's got a lot of extreme anxiety in certain ways, but those things, I would say, are separate to PDA, which is about not being able to do things and not follow through on demands or things she wants to do herself. So yeah, but I appreciate it's difficult for other people to understand sometimes, because though she spends a lot of time at home, she does set herself little kind of projects, and sometimes, manages to produce an artwork by a certain date that she's decided for herself. And then as I say that, I know that's why, is because it's, on her own terms, and from a very young age, that was written in all of her reports about what she did. She was fine and happy if it was on her terms, and something that she, was able to do at any given time. So yeah, the less pressure on her, the better. But sometimes that pressure comes from herself. So that's the challenge, I guess.
And it's interesting. There's 2 or 3 questions that you've been asked on the chat about education. One of which came up really quite early, which was, how do you help to support a child who can't attend secondary school but wants to? It's such a fight in her head, and so sad, because they're trying to help this individual's trying to help her take the lead. School's very accommodating, but she just can't.
Yeah.
Any suggestions?
So that is very similar to how Sasha is really. She always wanted to be in school. So I know there's a huge group, and I'm also quite passionate about talking about not finding school, and the huge numbers of families children who are finding it difficult to go to school, and the families trying to work out what to do about that. And I know a lot of families are choosing to homeschool because of the school environments and the way that system works. But for us, Sasha really wanted to be in a school because she wanted to be with other children her own age and having those experiences. But it was just too difficult. There's so much about the school day is difficult, right from the alarm bells that go off that, cause panic, but the noise and the smells and just everything about school really, but also those relationships. As much as Sasha kind of wants relationships, likes being sociable, that give and take and conversation is not something she manages very well with. So yeah, for us it's been a similar kind of struggle really, with trying to work out what to do, and there's so little provision really that covers that kind of need. And we have now at the moment there's somewhere, so Sasha is attending something, but for a very limited amount of time. But I would say it'll come down to the people and the attitudes, really. You know, yes, the environment matters as well, you know, and how big or small it is will, you know, be different for every child, what they can cope with in that respect. But the people and them being prepared to understand the individual, you know, and not just force their own ideas or their own agenda on someone, really is what is making the difference for us. So there is no easy answer, unfortunately. There's lots of little things that can be done, and you know, like I said, it will depend on the individual child, which is why not everyone. It's not the case that all PDAs can't attend school. You know, some do manage that all the way through, but it's definitely difficult for a lot, I would say.
Absolutely. Somebody's asked your opinion about whether or not you think it's possible for children with PDA to thrive in a mainstream school.
Thrive, that's the choice of words. Yeah, possibly for some, again, if that's what they want, you know, and if they are academic and they enjoy taking exams. You know, that's not something our daughter has ever enjoyed or ever done, really. So that pressure is too much for her. But yeah, I'd say some, but probably not many, because of the amount of demands and that it's being led by someone else all the time.
Mm-hmm. So one of our viewers has just asked, they've heard that you can't get an official diagnosis for PDA. Is it true? And can you get standalone PDA profile diagnosis after an ASD diagnosis?
And the diagnosis thing is really interesting, and I would recommend people turn to the PDA Society for more kind of, you know, individual help on that, and as to specific situations and different things that are happening in different parts of the country. You know, for us, it was we asked for a second opinion. Sasha was quite young. We were also told, like many people are, that it's not specifically in the medical manual, so it's not a diagnosis that can be given. We have, I think her diagnosis is a top line of actually ASD. I think they say in the book, I don't like the disorder, but the, you know, top line of autism, and then you know, PDA behaviours, basically something along those lines. It's about really having that description and understanding what those, you know, PDA features are, but finding people who understand that as well, it can be really difficult, I know, but I know the PDA Society has more kind of information and help about that. So.
Yeah, and this one might be a similar one of maybe a lady called Sarah's put in a question, which again might be one that goes back to someone like the PDA Society. However, she said she hasn't finished the book yet. She's really enjoying it so far. She bought it because she was interested in your personal experiences and to find out more information about the lived experience of a child with PDA. Her child has no diagnosis at all, but she's reached out to her school for advice and assessment in the first instance. And she just wants to know, can there be different levels of PDA, such as mild PDA, for want of a term? And what does the role of masking have in PDA, if any? And did you experience that with Sasha? Lots of questions in one.
Yeah. Did you say masking, that last?
Masking, yeah.
Yeah. So I used to always say that what you saw with Sasha was what you get. So she didn't really mask when she was at school, when she was younger. And, you know, her avoidance was clear for the teachers to see. But Sasha would never, she wouldn't really, well, what word to use? Her meltdowns would be more that she'd curl into a mushroom and not do anything. You know, there might be crying or voices raised if someone was really trying to push her, but it was kind of withdrawal rather than explosion, which probably helped, you know, somewhat at school because it wasn't, you know, disrupting everybody necessarily. So, but she didn't mask. So, and again, I think that's partly why I've been able to blog and write about it, because I think other people, to an extent, have, you know, believed us, understood us, because it was clear to see, really. But I know that's not the case for everybody. I know lots of families really struggle because they're, you know, there are PDAs who can and do mask, and it's more internalized avoidance. And then, yeah, it's difficult for others to see and understand that. So, yeah, it's a difficult one to cope with, but I know it happens. I mean, the word mild, I know, you know, within the autistic community as a whole, that kind of grading or levels of autism is not really welcome, because it doesn't, you know, describe what support is needed. Because somebody who is masking well might still need a lot of support. So it's kind of, yeah, I suppose about finding those supports and what is going to help is the important thing. I don't know if I've answered all those questions there, but
No, you've done well. There's a couple of slightly different angles, and then I might come back to some more school ones. But there's a question which said, "What inspired you to ask Mr. C to write a chapter?"
Oh, Mr. C. Oh, well, funnily you should say that.
Perfect timing, hey?
It's just about to make a special appearance. Yeah. I forgot to mention about my lovely background, which is one of my most favourite places. Obviously now it's with two of us. I might have to take it off the background. Yeah, anyway, so can you repeat the question and then maybe Mr. C can help?
What inspired you to ask Mr. C to write a chapter? Or maybe Mr. C, what inspired you to write a chapter should be the question.
I was told to.
I love it. You've gone muted. We can't hear you, unfortunately. Oh. That's better.
Right, so as it sounded, but we come to it from quite different perspectives. I mean, obviously, I've been home as much as Steph has, I'm not seeing as much of it. So it was just to bring it on as a different viewpoint, but from the same different viewpoint from the same starting point, if that makes sense. So it was don't get to hear many dad stories. So it seemed like quite an interesting thing to have to do. I was also told to.
And there's rumours are your chapter is quite amusing.
Well, I don't know.
I do. I mean, Sasha has told me that it is her favourite chapter in the book. So I have to take that, and it is because it is funny. So she likes anything that's a bit humorous, and mine wasn't funny enough for her or my chapter.
So I just tell it like it is, you know. So I'm not. I'm not saying Steph doesn't. She obviously does, but I take from my perspective has been very different. So it's been a lot more in short bursts that I've been with Sasha, and because Sasha's much more dependent on Steph than me, I see a different side of her, particularly when Steph goes away. So it, it's just a different way of looking at it. And well, if some people find it funny, that's all the best, because it's all about if life wasn't fun, there wouldn't be be difficult enough as it is.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Thank you for joining us.
That's right. Pleasure.
A few more questions to pick your brains, both of you, maybe. Someone's come through and said that 18-year-old daughter's got autism and PDA. She has year 9 education, and they can't find anything to motivate her to continue with schoolwork. They're an adult education school. Do you have any advice for them?
I mean, to motivate with schoolwork. It's so difficult because it really is dependent on the individual, and I would say we haven't managed to find anything really that will motivate Sasha, have we? No. It's it's dependent on her interests, and yeah, so no, I'm sorry.
Julia's raised her hand, so I think Julia's got an answer.
Oh, thank you. I must be polite and not interrupt. And
you did well.
Desperate. The word motivate needs to be forgotten and removed, because I was having a chat with somebody about this the other day, but PDAs don't lack motivation. We have, so much motivation. It's the ability to follow through with demands and the ability to overcome them that we lack. It's not the enjoyment of a task. It's not the lack of wanting to do something that's boring. We have motivation. That was proven when I wrote a book. I wasn't not doing it on my own because I was lacking motivation or desire to do it. I wasn't writing it because I couldn't. So the word motivation needs to be removed. And I would ask the question, does she need to do it now? The education bit. A friend of mine, not autistic but ADHD, when she was 16 and doing GCSE, she was far too busy going out and getting drunk, and so she, I forget what she got, but it was like a D or something in maths, and it's bothered her whole life. It's not caused a problem, but it's just bothered her because she knew she could do better. So at age 40, she enrolled at the college and got an A. So, but she just did that for herself. She just wanted to prove, actually, yes, I could do it, albeit 30 years or 25 years after, when she should have done it. But does it matter? You know? So I needed quite a lot of breaks from education. I think the modern term now is burnout. So I would tread carefully with any activity towards motivating her, because the more you do that, the more she'll go the other way and not. Yeah.
I think you put that so well, because motivating also goes without rewards and consequences, doesn't it? And it's that you want somebody else to do something. So it's again that who's leading that agenda and why are you doing it?
Yeah.
And totally agree as well with the education thing that, you know, we in this country we push all our children through that education system, sausage factory at the same age, and you know it's not right for everybody. No. But there's time later on and to find the things that really suit.
And I left school with no GCSEs, no qualifications, no nothing, still have nothing, and I think I'm doing all right. So you know, does it matter? All right, yes, if your child wants to become a rocket scientist or a brain surgeon, then they're going to need to stay in education, aren't they? But if your child, I mean, who knows? Like, if you think back to like when you were 16, 17, 18, what did you want to be? And I bet it's not what you are now. It's probably not even close. Because either you changed your mind or life took you on a different path. You know, not many of us are doing what we were wanting to do at that age. And I think for any child, it's a big decision to get them to decide at 15, 16, 17, 18, what do you want to do for the rest of your life?
Thank you. I'm trying my best to get through all these questions, but there may be something we don't manage to get through. My apologies if we don't. The next one I've got is Steph. You mentioned the phrase "kids do well if they can," which Anna thinks is perfectly true. And if they don't do well, it may be a missing skill. For her PDA son, it seems executive functioning issues play a big part, causing anxiety and avoidance. The question quickly: is there any organisations you know of that could help her with that?
Help the son with that. Again, I'd probably point them towards the PDA Society for a better answer than I can give on that. But yeah, executive functioning is something that is really impacted by this, I would say. Yep.
Sorry, Steph. I'm interrupting. Sorry, Steph. I put a link to the inquiry line in the chat earlier for anyone that wants to contact them. It's free, and you get an initial email, but you can have telephone calls as well with them for more in-depth chats.
Okay, there's a couple of other questions. Which one is about, are there any specific schools that specialise in PDA profile children? Again, that's probably a PDA Society question. If they could be contacted, that would probably be good. Another lady's put in here, our daughter's 100% is PDA. I've learned so much following your page for the years. Do you think there is a benefit in seeking a specific PDA diagnosis when already diagnosed with autism?
Ooh, that's another good question. So it again, it depends what that initial diagnosis says, I guess, and at what stage, and whether, you know, this realization came later and there's more you can add to that diagnosis. It's more about describing the needs or the difficulties for the individual child, I would say. I think it was something I struggled with because we wanted, I would have ideally gone to see a private person to get, the official, as it were, diagnosis. But I knew that Sasha, she already struggled with the assessments we'd had, and I didn't want to put her under any more stress. So at some point we had to go, we didn't need that because we had supportive people around us. So as I said, we've been so lucky with that. But I can see why some parents do want to go and do that because they're not being believed, and again, that will come down to the individual child and how they're presenting. But so, it's not something I can answer easily. I think it has to be a family's decision, but I guess I would always put the child first and what's, what they can cope with and what's going to help them the most.
Okay, thank you. Somebody's asked, is the book going to also be available in Spanish soon?
Oh, I don't know. I guess that would be down to the publishers. I was really pleased that they let us record the audio for it. That was, Chris and I both have, voiced or recorded our own chapters. So that was really good, because initially they didn't think we were going to do that. So yeah, I'm not sure about different languages. I'll have to ask them. I'll get back to you later.
Julia's got her hand up again.
I just wanted to add something to the last question. I would say it doesn't have to be a formal diagnosis, but I would get something, because it's fine while your child is under 18 and being nicely supported by education and the NHS, etc. But then there comes adulthood, where the services are somewhat lacking. Sorry to be a party pooper for all the parents out there, but it's handy to have it on a bit of paper when you have no longer got parents who can come with you to appointments, and things like that. So it doesn't have to be, PDA written down. It can be, autism with demand avoidance, or it's just anything, as long as it's written somewhere. Doesn't even have to be a formal diagnosis. It could just be in reports that come from school or something like that, where they've seen marked demand avoidance and things like that, so that it's documented for when they go into adulthood, and adult services of what they are.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
Another one, Sarah's asked, how would she go about suggesting training around supporting PDA for her son's teachers? And is there any specific training you could signpost professionals to? Other than the ones Advanced do, obviously.
Yeah, Advanced runs some great workshops and courses, and the PDA Society has training and will go into education as well. How you get them to sign up for that? I guess, again, on the PDA Society, there's sort of shorter information for education staff, and that's, a good starting point, is thinking about, we all know teachers don't really have a lot of spare time, so it's presenting the facts to them, in as little space as possible, if that makes sense. And then, hopefully the good people will want to go and find out more, because they'll want to support the individual child in the best way. Sadly, not all of them do, or they have the other pressures that stop them being able to. So
I was just going to add, the PDA Society have a fabulous 20-minute recorded thing. So I don't know. I think it's just it links on their website. I don't know where it goes to, but so if your teachers don't have 20 minutes, then you need to look at their schedule, I think. Because it doesn't. 20 minutes. That's not even an episode of anything, is it? It's not. You can't cook dinner in 20 minutes. So there is that, and which is a good starting point. To cover PDA in 20 minutes, you're not going to get everything, but it's a good starting point. And there are now, not just the PDA Society, but a lot of places are now doing accredited training, which also helps, because a lot of professional bodies will not pay for their staff to go on a course if it's not accredited. So before, a lot of teachers and other professionals had to pay themselves to go on training, which is good. That's good they're doing it. But now, because a lot of courses now are now accredited, it means now that schools can now actually send their staff on training. So things are improving.
And if they're looking for strategies or approaches, ways to help, there is a good book called The Educator's Experience of PDA that I also recommend.
There is.
That's a good idea.
So how are we doing? A few more questions? Have you still got capacity, Steph?
Yes, if there's more.
A couple more. Yeah, there's quite a few more. So do you feel that Sasha has come to an acceptance of the fact that she won't be in school, college, and won't have those experiences with peers that she wants to? Because this lady's daughter is so desperate to be able to go to school.
Yeah, I think as she's got older, she's understood more what those challenges are for her, as well as what the challenges the system presents. I don't know if she's got to wanting that. I think she would still like it, but yeah, maybe she's accepting that it's not happening so much, or what those challenges are for her.
Mhm. And actually, there's a second part to that question. They pressed send too soon. She says it feels damaging to keep trying watching the trauma and burnout which follows. So
Follows from trying, yeah, and it not being right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is. And I think, you know, I got to that point with Sasha where I had to say that wasn't the right setting, you know. Well, she was kind of showing the signs that it wasn't. Then, yeah, we kind of had to try and guide, I guess, as to the right answer was.
I think
Hello.
It's more
Oh,
to
sorry.
school and education. So, what?
Really hard to hear you.
Got older,
Education and stuff.
there's more schools and education, and what I think she realised as she's got older is that actually she doesn't need the education perhaps that others have got, because she's a bright girl. She can write beautifully. She can do things that other children her age can't do. But it's the sort of non-educational part of school, I think, that she really missed more than the educational side.
Go on, Julia.
Oh, it's gone. Give me a second. Yeah, so it's not the child here that we need to change or fix. If she's experiencing these burnouts from trying to go to school, the problem lies with school. It's school that needs to change, not the PDA. So we need to remove that blame and move it over to the school side and get them to think about what they're doing that's not right. And it could be something very small, or it could be something quite big. It could be the entire setting is wrong. But except in very rare circumstances, there is no reason why PDAs cannot access some form of education. So I'm using that very loosely. So I don't mean in full-time mainstream school with no support, because that's not happening for most PDAs, but they can access some form of education, be it self learning, like Sasha's been doing, if their environment is okay. So Sasha's environment at home is okay, so she's learned at home. If we took Sasha now and shoved her into a great big college and said, get on with it, love, we would undo everything that mum and dad have done her whole life. And so, because it's the wrong setting, it's not any blame on Sasha, you know, that's just that environment doesn't suit her. So it's finding where, you know, and changing what we think education is, because everyone thinks education is, oh, it's very formal with books and a chalkboard and a teacher and a classroom, and, you know, but it isn't. Sasha's bright, you know. I think I'm quite bright. I learnt most of my stuff from watching quizzes on television, so I'm very good in a pub quiz. But it's about finding where, you know, where it fits for your child. So I would look at maybe other provisions, or even some time out of school at home doing self-directed learning.
Thank you. That's really helpful. Thank you, Julia. Question for those people in the US. They said, any advice for us in helping others, family, friends, and school understand and acknowledge PDA, and how this adds a new layer to autism?
Sorry, what was the last bit? Add a new
How
layer.
it adds a new layer to autism.
Yeah. So again, on the PDA Society, there's some good sort of bite-sized, you know, information about it, and it's kind of trying to pass that on. I know it's difficult when people are not willing to listen and, you know, open their ears or their eyes, but we sometimes say that, you know, if there's PDAs, and often you know, families, kind of, that might be the case where there's more family members who are autistic or PDA as well, leaving kind of information lying around, or trying to feed it in some other way, like leaving a YouTube playing somewhere that someone might come across it, you know, a video, that sort of thing sometimes works. But yeah, I know it's a shame when, you know, we've been so lucky with the wider support we've had. I wish everybody could have that.
Would you have done similar things to help describe to Sasha what PDA was and how her brain works differently?
Yeah, so she, I guess she's seen it probably via my blog quite a lot, because she wouldn't read any books or, you know, paper that I would leave lying around for her. So yeah, I think she's not wanted to delve into it too much, but you know what she's seen from my blog, that's kind of enough information for her, I would say.
Mm-hmm. Julia, your hand's up again. Please do come in.
I'm trying to be polite.
You're doing really well.
I'm doing quite well for ADHD. I think that, you know, it's quite good. I was going to say the inquiry line has a list of American professionals who diagnose, assess, support PDA. There's about 10 on the list, which when you consider the size of America, that's quite poor. But it's better than saying there are none. So, and I think a couple of them do this via medical insurance. So just putting that out there. So if you want the list, I think you have to email in. I don't know if it's on the actual website or whether you have to email the inquiry line and ask, but they do have a list. And I know a lot of them because obviously America is huge. And you cannot go from one side to the other for a PDA assessment. That's just silly. But a lot of them do online stuff as well. So that takes the geography out anyway. But yeah.
It's a time thing, isn't it? It's becoming more widely.
America are catching up. So this is good news.
No, that's great. Thank you for that. There's a quick question here about how likely is it that parents would also have PDA? Possible?
It's definitely possible, you know, in some families. So yeah, I mean, you know, that said with autism as well, often, you know, I think that the feeling is that it's genetic and there might be that, and yeah, that adds an extra layer of challenge in, I know.
Joe's asked us, how have you tackled helpfully the bias that remains around PDA when communicating with others of seeking support?
But that good, because there was a bit in my book I'm going to read out, if that's okay.
Absolutely,
because this kind of feeds into why I wrote the book as well, and to something I mentioned on my Facebook page the other day about a negative review. Somebody who just said they don't believe in PDA at all. So in my book, I'd said the following comments, and more along the same lines, have been made to many parents of PDA children, including me. PDA is just a name for children who don't want to do as they are told. PDA doesn't exist, it's just lazy parenting. Your child isn't autistic, they just need firm boundaries. Need to be more strict. She's had too much chance to pick and choose what she wants to do. You should just say no to her. Rules and routine will help. And if she doesn't learn how to do that now, what will she do when she's an adult? So there, you know, phrases that I know lots of other people here will have heard before as well. And I've put, then I think there might be a tendency to judge parents of PDA children as being lazy and inept at parenting. And one of the most difficult issues about pathological demand avoidance for others to understand is the fact that there are times when some demands will be complied with. So if these PDA children can do it once, why not the other times? They're not avoiding all demands. Doesn't that mean they are picking and choosing? But so for certain periods in the last few years, Sasha has gone to school and worn uniform and brushed her teeth. So surely they're all demands that she has complied with. So they are, but it was pointless to assume that if she can do that, you can make her do anything, or that because she'd done it once, she could do it again. There's so many factors that affect what is possible every single day. And even when we had recognised her needs and were being as flexible as possible in the way we parented Sasha, we found that she might be able to manage to comply with demands one day, but not the next. For individuals with other profiles of autism, routine is often favoured, and in many cases, routine is actually vital to get through each day. Knowing what is going to happen helps lessen anxiety for some children. So we knew that routine helped Sasha in some ways, but the pathological demand avoidance would override that. So she couldn't cope with being told what to do every day. She needed to be in control, manage that, you know, that anxiety and that level of what was happening. And we experienced this constant seesaw of trying to have a routine, but that routine being constantly interrupted or changed. novelty and finding something new to try were welcomed by Sasha, but only as long as she had suggested them. And just saying all that, you know, that was different to what we were experiencing with our older daughter. And that's really how, you know, we saw those differences a lot. And, you know, we made sense of it. But I know for others, it's so difficult because you're trying to explain that to other people and it's not obvious unless you're living with it all the time. Yeah, challenge.
Sounds, yeah.
Hello.
Oh, hello,
Sorry.
Julie.
I just wanted to add something. I heard a phrase on the internet today, and I thought, oh, that could be applied to PDA, couldn't it? And it was, many can climb a hill, but few can climb a mountain. And I thought, oh, that's quite good, isn't it? It just, I don't know what, sometimes these things speak to me, and then I, you know, make my own meaning of them. But, you know, just because a PDA can brush their teeth, you know, and do those things, does not mean they can do everything. You know, just like many of us could now go and climb a hill, very few of us will be able to climb Mount Everest and say, oh, I did that. And there's no shame in that. There's no, you know, I would, you know, for me to climb a hill, I now need a mobility scooter, you know. So I think there's this assumption, isn't there, that when the PDA is doing particularly well, because it does sort of peak and, you know, ebb and flow, and they are managing lots of demands and coping very well, there's this assumption almost like that sort of PDA is almost like gone away. And so we start turning up the dial of demands, and then we end up back where we started. And the demands don't necessarily make sense. So you may have a PDA who goes to school and does homework and all sorts of things, but cannot manage to wash and dress themselves. And you think, well, that doesn't make any sense. But it does if you look at it from an autistic point of view, rather than a neurotypical point of view. That's the thing where people's lenses need to change. I'll shut up now. I'm being all
No, it makes sense.
I'm being all dreamy. It's the cold. I swear, I've got a temperature and everything.
Oh, couple more questions, and then are we about done? Do you think? I don't wish to
Yeah.
keep it too late tonight. You've been amazing. Thank you so far, Steph. There's a question here from Sean about, in your experience, are there other conditions at play that closely mimic PDA? Their daughter is very demand avoidant. She's not at school and has been diagnosed with ADHD and anxiety. Didn't get an ASD diagnosis for making eye contact, etc., etc. Sean's convinced she's PDA, but finds herself second guessing herself as well. There's so much to her condition, and things seem to change almost daily, and the goalposts move constantly. They're on the brink of paying for a second opinion, but it is really expensive, as we all know. So, any thoughts?
Yeah, so I mean, there is that kind of, there's just a lot of mix, and you know, there's very few individuals that will fall neatly into one box or the other. You know, I think so many have a mix of, you know, conditions. That's the right word. I don't like that word either, but you know, things going on. Sasha is, we did the Connors assessment for ADHD when she was about 6, you know, and we did a parents questionnaire, school did a questionnaire. I think our questionnaire kind of suggested she might be over the threshold for ADHD, but the school's one said not. So, you know, we kind of left that. Sasha doesn't, she won't take any medicine at all. So for us, kind of knowing about the ADHD, you know, if that had made a difference, if she could have had medication that would have helped, that was a whole other things discussed anyway, but it didn't matter for us because the autism and the PDA were kind of more overriding as to what was going on for her. So, you know, it was so obvious, I guess, for us about our daughter, but I can totally see where that isn't for other children, you know, and that the lines do get blurred and therefore then difficult. So really, I guess I'd take that step back and think about what you're doing that helps your child and kind of that, see the evidence of that as you do it. So if you're reducing demand and then they're able to cope with more, or you know, they're coping with life more, then that's kind of, I suppose, the proof that you need to do things that way.
Thank you, that's really helpful. Steph, there is quite a lot of other questions. Is there a way that people can contact you directly to kind of follow up on these? Because I fear that we're going to be here until quite late if we keep
Yeah.
picking your brains now. So is there a way people can contact you that they can just kind of ask and pick your brains and at a time when also you maybe haven't had quite such a busy day?
Yeah, I'm happy for anybody to email me anytime, and it's at stephs2girls@gmail.com. So that is Steph, STEPH, then STWOGIRLS @gmail.com. Yeah, I can try and reply to all my emails.
That's great, thank you, because there are, as I said, there's quite a lot more questions. Some of them are quite long and in depth, and I don't want to cut people out, but it's going to be quite tricky. Somebody's just put here though, the book is fabulous, easy to read, fun and insightful, honest, open, positive and helpful. Thank you. So there you go.
That's a lovely comment. Thank you. Whoever's written that, if you could just copy and paste that onto Amazon for reviews there. That, like I said, we had one negative review on Amazon, and that kind of brings it down. So the more nicer reviews would be so much appreciated. So anybody who had time to go and put that would be great. But thank you to everybody who joined tonight and who followed the blog or the Facebook page, whether you're old timers or you just found us recently, because all of that support has meant a lot to us as well. And that's why we've been able to write the book, to try and help other people, because we had that support. So thank you, and all the people along the way who supported us and believed us, and our friends and family and teachers, teaching assistants, out of school gym assistants, doctors, dentists. We've had a lot. We have been lucky, we know. So we appreciate all of that.
Well, thank you so much, and it's been such a privilege. Thank you so much, Steph, for letting me ask you lots of questions tonight. And I'm hoping that everybody that's listened has really enjoyed this evening. We have recorded it. Steph will have the copy of the recording. So I've had a couple of people say things like the Wi-Fi's dropped out. So it is recorded. We were hoping we'd go on a Facebook Live, but it didn't work. It wouldn't give me permission to do that. Yeah, thank you all very much. I'm going to end the recording now, and hopefully that will end for many of us. But thank you all for your time, and thank you especially Steph, and also Julia. Thank you so much for coming on and your insights as well. It's been really good to have you along too.
And thank you for writing that forward as well.
You're welcome. And I did that on my own as well.
I know.
Yeah.
I'll stop now.
Thank you, Debbie.